All right, so we're on Algebra 1, Lesson 5.4. We're going to actually look at the slope formula in this lesson. So for our warm-up, we're just going to review adding and subtracting negative, positive numbers. So for number 1, if I have a 4 plus a negative 3, we're going to look, again, we look at the absolute value. When we have different signs, we take the difference and have the sign of the bigger one. So the difference between 6 and 4 is 2, and since there's more negatives, the answer is negative 2. Negative 3 plus 5, we're taking 3 away from 5, so we're left with 2. Negative 7 minus 7, and minus minus, that's going to be a minus 14 because we have the same sign. We're just adding them together and tacking on the same sign. And then 2 minus a minus 1, remember we have two minuses next to each other. It becomes a positive, so 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay, now we're just going to review finding the x and y intercept. So if we're going to find the x-intercept, remember that's where we're plugging 0 into y. So if I put 0 into y, that term goes away, and I'm just left with the x equals 8. For my y-intercept, I'm plugging 0 into x, and then this will go away, and I'm going to be left with 2y equals 8. If I divide both sides by 2, I get y equals 4. Okay, and our next one, x-intercept, again, I'm going to put 0 in for y, so that term cancels. I'm left with 3x equals negative 15. Divide both sides by 3, and x is equal to negative 5. For my y-intercept, when I plug 0 into 3x, I'm going to be left with 5y equals negative 15. When I divide both sides by 5, I get y equals negative 3. So my y-intercept is negative 3. Okay, so the objective for today is to find the slope by using the slope formula. So we're going to actually learn with the slope formula today. In the last lesson, lesson 5.3, we looked at how slope was described as the constant rate of change of a line. And we saw how to find slope of a line by using its graph, and that's what we did with the rise over the run. But there's also a formula we can use to find the slope of a line, and it's usually represented by the letter m. So if you see the letter m, they're referring to the slope. And to use this formula, we need to use the coordinates of two different points. So in words, the slope of a line is the ratio of the difference in y values to the difference in the x values between any 2 points. Remember, a ratio is like a fraction. So the formula that we use is if we have a point x1, y1, that's whatever that first point is, and then we have another point on the line x2, y2, the value of the slope, again we use m, is equal to the y2 minus the y1 over the x2 minus the x1. So for example, if I have the point 2 comma negative 3 and 1 comma 4, we take our y2, which is our 4, minus our y1, so minus a minus 3, divided by our x2, which was 1, minus our x1, 2. So we're going to have 4 plus 3, which becomes 7, divided by a negative 1, so our slope is negative 7. Okay, so let's try an example. If we're given the point 5, negative 7, and 6, negative 4. So let's write those out just so you guys know what's going on. So 5, negative 7, and 6, negative 4. And when you guys are first starting this, if it helps to write x1, y1 above those, you can do that. So x2, y2. So our slope is equal to y2, so our negative 4, minus our y1, which was 7. Let me see, or wait, negative 7, sorry, I forgot that here. Negative 7, divided by our x2, which was 6, minus our x1, 5. So a negative 4 minus a minus 7, this becomes a minus 4 plus 7, which becomes a positive 3, divided by 6 minus 5, which is 1, so your slope is 3. Sometimes you're not given the 2 points to use in a formula, and you might just have to choose those points from a graph. As long as those points are on the line, as long as like the line passes through the points, then you can choose any points you want. And it's oftentimes that's nice because you can pick nice simple points. Like if it goes through 0, 0, use it because that's an easy point to use. So in this graph, they actually are showing us 2 points, but even still, we could have picked other points. So we've got the point negative 2 and 0, 2. I'm going to use this as my first point, and this is my second point. So my y2 is 2. My y1 is -2, so minus a -2, divided by my x2, which is right up here, which is 0, minus my x1, which is a -2. So now I've got 2 plus 2 divided by 0 plus 2, which comes out to 4 over 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Again, it makes sense. Should your slope be positive? Yes, in the last lesson, we looked at how to tell if it's a positive or negative slope. If it's slanting up like this, yes, that should be a positive slope. So just to double check yourself, if you get a positive answer for your slope, then you're on the right track. So we should have a positive. Okay, for this table, it's showing us values of x and y of a linear relationship. To find the slope, we can choose any 2 points we want as long as they go together. I like to find the easy points. So for example, I look up here and I see a 0, 1, and then a 1, -1. Those just look like easier numbers to work with. So I would do 0, 1. Sorry, that 0 is a little messed up. And 1, -1 is my points. So now my y2 is -1 minus my y1, which was 1, divided by my x2, which is 1, minus my x1, which is 0. -1 becomes a -2, divided by 1 minus 0, which is 1, and we're just left with a -2. Okay? So again, to make life easier for yourself, pick easy points if you get to choose. Remember that the slope is a rate of change. In real-world problems, finding the slope can give you information about how a quantity is changing. So we're going to look at a real-world example. The graph over here to the right shows the average electricity in dollars. So electricity is on your x, or your y-axis, I'm sorry. And then your months, how that electricity is changing, are on your x-axis. And it wants us to find the slope of the line and then explain what that means. So they already give us points. I'm going to use 2, 12 as my x1, y1, and 4, 24 as my x2, y2. So y2 is 24, y1 is 12, divided by x2, which is 4, minus my x1, which is 2. So I get 12 over 2, which comes out to 6. Now, what does this 6 actually mean? Oh, we have to actually explain that on the next slide. So the slope represents what? Well, in this situation, your y values is the cost of electricity. I'm going to use capital E to stand for electricity. And your x values represented the months. So if you're getting a change of 6, that means that it's changing $6. You're increasing $6. Let me rewrite that. The cost of electricity is increasing, because it's positive 6, $6 per month. Because remember, slope is a rate of change with our y values on top divided by our x values. So it's cost per month, and we got $6 is the cost that electricity is increasing every month. If you know the equation that describes a line, you can find its slope by using any 2 ordered pair solutions. And it's often easiest to use the ordered pairs that contain the intercepts. So we already talked about how to find intercepts. That was in our warm-up, plugging in 0 for the opposite one. So if you're not given points, the easiest ones to solve for are your intercepts. So for example, on this problem, it wants us to find the slope of the line yx, or 4x minus 2y equals 16. But we're not given any points. We can solve for the x and y intercepts though. Our x-intercept we're going to find by plugging 0 into our y. So then we're just left with 4x equals 16. If we divide both sides by 4, our x is equal to 4. So our coordinate is 4, 0, because we plugged in 0 for our y. McGee, stop. Sorry guys, had to tell my dog to stop. Okay, for our y-intercept, we're going to plug 0 into x. So this goes away, and I'm left with minus 2y equals 16. Divide both sides by -2. And now I'm left with y equals -8. So the line contains the point 4, 0, and then our y-intercept is 0, negative 8. And now we can use that in the slope formula. So slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to use the 0, negative 8 as my x2, y2. So negative 8 minus 0 divided by 0 minus 4. That comes out to negative 8 over negative 4. Negatives cancel, and I'm just left with 2. So this line has a slope of 2. So big thing from this lesson, again, you guys, you need to understand the slope formula. You need to understand which points that you're keeping your points together. So if you choose one point to be your second point, make sure you're using the same y2 and x2 from that point. And again, if you're not given any points, it's easiest to choose things like the intercepts. Those are easy points to use. So I think this will make more sense on your practice when you practice with it on your homework. And that is all.